Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, burning up. The U.S. is in for another massive heat wave. Millions of Americans are expected to face triple-digit highs over the next few days. We're tracking where the sweltering heat is going and when people could catch a break from the high temps. Pressure campaign. The January 6th committee focusing on former President Trump's efforts to get state officials to overturn election results. The key testimony today coming from Georgia's Secretary of State. The questions he'll likely face about that now infamous phone call with the former president asking him to find thousands of votes. Plus, a Georgia election worker plans to tell the committee how she became the target of a smear campaign, why the committee is deciding to make her testimony public. We'll take a look ahead at what we can expect today. Cutting costs. Americans are looking for new ways to save as inflation soars. How everyday services are adapting to the adjusting economy. Plus, how one savvy shopper spent less than $5 on more than $100 worth of groceries. She'll share her tips on how you can save too. And royal milestone. Prince William turns 40. How the future heir to the throne is using his birthday to channel his late mother, Princess Diana, and the new royal roles he is taking on. Hard to believe he's 40 years old.
I can't believe that. Yeah, absolutely. There's just always something going on with him.
And his grandmother celebrating 70 years on the throne.
Look
Unreal.
at that, which you were there for.
Which I was there for. It was very fun. A good party. All right. We're going to begin this hour with the latest on that massive heat wave stretching across the Midwest.
Millions of Americans are under heat advisories today, with temperatures in some cities expected to hit more than 100 degrees. It comes on the heels of record-breaking temperatures last week, and if the heat wasn't enough, the scorching conditions are also complicating people's travel plans. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us now from Chicago with that bundle of good news. Hey, Shaq, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, summer is here and so are those record temperatures. I'm sure you see some of the runners behind me getting in that workout before things get too hot here in Chicago. But across the country, about 70% of Americans are expected to see temperatures above 90 degrees. 55 million folks expected to see temperatures above 100 degrees. Those temperatures not just potentially dangerous, but could add to those travel issues.
This morning, triple-digit temperatures have Americans sweating from coast to coast. As a heat dome spanning from the Midwest to the deep South moves east, more than 100 heat records are expected to be broken this week. The Century Club extending from Minnesota and Nebraska to Texas and Florida. The heat turning deadly in Houston, where a 5-year-old boy died after being left inside a vehicle for several hours. Around the country, communities are looking for ways to stay safe. In Nashville, Lisa McCready leads a program focused on providing air conditioning units to the elderly and people in need.
All of last summer, which was fairly mild, we gave out 48 units. As of right now, today, just a little over a month into the program, we've given out 39.
And in Chicago, a typical source of summer heat relief delayed. The city's 49 outdoor pools not opening until July 5th because of a lifeguard shortage. And if you're thinking of getting away for July 4th, experts say be flexible.
I'm stuck here trying to figure out how to get home.
The airlines are still recovering from a Juneteenth and Father's Day weekend that saw some 3,500 flights canceled.
They simply don't have enough crews to operate all these flights.
And the extreme heat may complicate air travel further. If it's too hot, planes might require longer runways or be forced to restrict the amount of weight they carry.
There are always going to be weather cancellations. There are always going to be cancellations due to air traffic control. That's not the big picture here right now. This is an industry in crisis.
Now, this past holiday weekend was the busiest one of the year, with the July 4th holiday coming up in less than 2 weeks. And this extreme heat is going to be a continuing problem. According to the EPA, in the 1960s, we averaged about 2 heat waves a year. Now that number is 6. Guys?
All right, Shaquille Brewster, stay cool. Thank you so much.
And let's get a check now on your Morning News Now weather.
Michelle Grossman is back with us to tell us what else is going on across the country. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, we have a couple stories. We have that heat, of course, on this first day of summer. We're also watching monsoon moisture, which is a good thing in the long run, but the short term, we're looking at the potential for some flash flooding. So this is the overall picture for Tuesday here. We have strong storms this morning. They're going to move out. Then we have the chance for some storms from the Great Lakes into parts of the Central Plains. Mild Rockies, we're drying out there. That's the good news. Flood watch in the south. southwest, especially in New Mexico. That's where we're seeing that monsoon moisture. And of course, the big story remains on this first day of summer, those record highs stretching from the Great Lakes through the Central Plains, the South Central states into the Southeast. 33 million Americans impacted by a heat alert, but that means many more impacted by the heat as we go throughout today. We're looking at temperatures in the 90s and also 100s in some spots. You factor in the humidity. That's part of the story, too. We're going to feel like 110 in some spots. It's all due to this area of high pressure. It's like a heat pump pumping that heat and humidity in, and that's what we're going to continue to see over the next several days. We're stuck in a stubborn pattern where this high pressure doesn't want to budge. It's sort of a roadblock, and it's keeping this hot air in place. So record heat for June. We're looking at temperatures really hot once again today, 90s, 100s. Shaq talked about those, the Century Club. And we're looking at record-breaking temperatures once again today. We've broken a lot of records over the past 2 weeks, and we're going to continue to do so this week. Look at some of these temperatures. Near 100 degrees in Topeka, Chicago, Little Rock, 98 degrees in Houston, pretty close to the record highs. So most likely we're going to break some records here. Same story as we go throughout tomorrow. Lots of red and pink on the map indicating where that hot air is in place. San Antonio to Houston, Little Rock, Nashville most likely breaking the record there of 100 degrees, and Atlanta 100, Tallahassee 103. And again, that's going to be a big story because the record of all time for the state of Florida is 109, and we could beat that by Wednesday or Thursday. So we're going to watch that very closely. That heat holds on once again throughout the rest of the week. We could see some storms because of the heat and humidity. Not so much of a threat today. We don't get a slight risk today. That will be the first time since April 23rd. So we're hoping that happens. But we still could see some gusty thunderstorms from the Great Lakes to parts of the Central Plains. Tomorrow, though, we bring back that slight risk in parts of the Northeast, interior Northeast of Pennsylvania, New York, also interior parts of Pennsylvania into the Mid-Atlantic. So Ithaca to State College, D.C., also Harrisburg. We're looking at the chance for some gusty winds gusting over 60 miles per hour, some hail, and also the chance of a few tornadoes.
I bet 109 in Florida is not a dry heat, is it?
I know. Oh, can you imagine?
Ooh.
No.
All right.
Just sweating.
Yeah.
All
right.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Now to the latest on the economy. We're expecting to find out soon whether a gas tax break is in the cards from the White House as historic inflation impacts both Wall Street and Main Street alike. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from Miami with the latest on this. Hey, Sam, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Look, there's a couple of things that we're watching for today. One, the stock markets reopen after a 3-day holiday. Existing home sale data, that comes out as well. Key economic indicators, as the president says, recession is not inevitable. But you talk to many businesses, like this barbershop in Miami, they say they are taking a haircut. Customers used to come and sit in these chairs on a weekly basis. It's now bi-weekly or monthly, as so many consumers and businesses right now, guys, are modifying their spending.
All eyes this morning fixated on a free-falling Wall Street after the S&P suffered its worst weekly drop since early in the pandemic. And runaway inflation continues to crush consumers. President Biden is trying to project confidence.
There's nothing inevitable about a recession.
But he's also considering asking lawmakers for a temporary pause on the federal gas tax ahead of July 4th. With a record 42 million Americans expected to hit the road for the holiday weekend, and gas still hovering around $5 a gallon. The move, which requires congressional approval, could save drivers about 18 cents a gallon.
Well, I hope I have a decision based on the data I'm looking for by the end of the week.
Soaring prices at the pump and the grocery store and the airways, resulting in changing consumer behavior, like visits to the barbershop or hairstylist. Ahmet Sim owns Salon Simis in Fairfax, Virginia, where he says he pays up to 40% more for shampoos and coloring products. He's trying to keep prices the same.
Instead of coming every 4 weeks, they are now coming in every 7 or every 8 weeks sometimes.
Increasingly, though, people are simply spending less. U.S. flight bookings fell 2.3% in May, even as airports buckled with traffic. People eating out at restaurants dipped 11% through Sunday compared to the same week in 2019, according to data from OpenTable. Car sales dropped 4% in May, and existing home sales have fallen for 3 straight months. Though this Florida real estate agent says this is a healthy correction, adding higher interest rates have cooled frenzied behavior.
Are you seeing less of that? Houses going way above asking?
I do think in some pockets of every market, you are still seeing multiple offers, but you are seeing much less of that than we saw 6 months ago or a year ago.
With the cost of everything on the rise, Uncertainty is the only guarantee for families.
And it's not just consumers, guys. Businesses, of course, also feeling the pinch. This barber shop, the same owner, has 20 of them, a salon next door as well. They're seeing revenues right now drop about 20%, but they want to keep prices exactly the same because they know if you raise prices, people's budgets are so fragile right now, they risk losing customers. Joe, Savannah, back to you.
Sam, thank you so much.
Now, today, the January 6th committee will resume their work with a fourth hearing this afternoon. This time, the committee plans to focus on what they say was the Trump campaign's effort to overturn election results at the state level in the weeks leading up to the attack on the Capitol. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Hake has been following the investigation for us and joins us live from the Capitol. Hey, Garrett, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. I'm thinking about today's hearing as a prequel to the one we saw last Thursday. The committee backing up about a month and a half, focusing on this effort in the states by the Trump campaign, they will say, to either find votes to overturn the election results or to find fake electors to simply come to Washington and lie about who won. The January 6th committee now widening their probe, focusing on what they say was a Trump White House effort to overturn the election results in two key states in the weeks leading up to the attack on the Capitol.
We'll show evidence of the president's involvement in this scheme. We'll show courageous state officials who stood up and said they wouldn't go along with this plan.
Among those state officials, Georgia's Republican Secretary of State and his deputy on the receiving end of this recorded phone call from President Trump after the state was called for Joe Biden.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
And Arizona's Republican House Speaker will be asked about efforts to send a false slate of pro-Trump electors to be counted in Washington, rather than those rightfully won by Biden.
The system held because a lot of state and local elections officials upheld their oath to their Constitution.
Former President Trump in a speech Friday attacking the committee as a sham and mocking former Vice President Pence, the subject of last Thursday's hearing.
Mike Pence had absolutely no choice but to be a human conveyor belt. Here's a human conveyor belt.
Pence making a passing reference to the insurrection late Monday while encouraging Republicans to look to the future.
You know, we've all been through a lot over the past several years. A global pandemic, social unrest, a divisive election, a tragic day at our nation's capital. So now is the time for us to have the courage of our convictions.
Committee members responding that the former president's continued claims of a stolen election validate their work.
He's essentially saying, yeah, I did it and I'll do it again.
Guys, the other piece of this we're continuing to follow is this question of a referral to the Justice Department by the committee. The committee hasn't made any formal decision on that question, but they seem to be leaning away from simply writing up their own version of an indictment and sending it to the DOJ. A, they know it would carry relatively little legal weight, and B, they know that those prosecutors at the federal level and the state level are watching the work they do on hearing days like today. Savannah?
All right, Garrett Hake, thank you so much. We know you'll be watching later, and you can catch our January 6th hearing right here on NBC News Now. Our coverage begins at 12:30 p.m. Eastern.
It's not just the January 6th hearings that are taking center stage in Washington this week. Several major decisions from the Supreme Court could come down as soon as today. Of course, one of the biggest and perhaps most consequential decisions facing the nation's highest court is whether to overturn the constitutional right to an abortion, which was established nearly 50 years ago through Roe versus Wade. A leaked draft opinion earlier this year indicated the Supreme Court justices could be prepared to do just that. NBC's chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander is at the White House for us this morning. Peter, good morning to you. So we all remember when that draft decision came out, it not only rocked the foundation of the court, it sparked a rash of protests around the country. So what can we expect in Washington as they prepare for this final decision to be passed down?
Well, Joe, for starters, as you say, it could come any day. The court expected to overturn Roe v. Wade that would end the constitutional right to an abortion. If it happens, 13 states, Texas notably among them, already have what they call these trigger laws that would immediately ban abortions. Other states, like California, have been preparing to serve as safe havens of sorts for abortion rights, offering support and legal services to women who travel from out of state for an abortion. Abortion rights advocates right now, they want President Biden to take executive actions that would expand reproductive health services on federal lands and to increase access to abortion pills, abortion medications. The president says that he is considering taking action, but I've spoken to White House officials over the weekend and just yesterday. They wouldn't detail his plans, and to be clear, there's only so much that he can do by executive order. Joe?
There's another big case we're still waiting for, and it comes in the wake of the series of recent mass shootings we've seen. The Supreme Court set to decide on the constitutionality of a New York law that limits handguns in public. Remind us some of the details about this case and what could be the broader implications.
Yeah, so this is a century-old law. If the Supreme Court strikes it down, it could make it a lot easier to legally carry a handgun in New York State that officials say may have some violent consequences for cities already struggling to tamp down on the spike in gun crime that began 2 years ago, basically at the start of the pandemic. And if that happens, it could reach beyond New York. A handful of other states, California, Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, among them, they have similar laws that could be struck down. Still, if it happens, it's likely that New York would respond by crafting a new law that would more specifically address the ruling, Joe.
And we're looking at two huge issues here, abortion and guns. Looking at the possibility of judicial losses on both fronts for the president, how is the White House preparing for that?
Well, let's focus on the guns for a moment. The president's been urging Congress to act on gun reform, specifically in the wake of the Uvalde school shooting. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, as we've been reporting out, has been moving in that direction. An announcement on the text of the bill, meaning they agreed on the language, could be as soon as today. Democrats are hoping for a Senate vote by the end of this week. That's significant because they go away for a 2-week break for July 4th at the end of this week. The sticking point so far has been what they call this boyfriend loophole that would extend restrictions to ban weapons purchases from domestic abusers who are not married to or don't live with their partner. They're trying to better target or expand that to focus on boyfriends and other partners that may have been the victims of domestic abuse in the past.
All right. Peter Alexander, thank you so much, Peter.
Let's stay on all this and bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, as always, thanks for joining us. So let's start with the Supreme Court. So that leaked draft opinion has been out there for more than a month now, but we still don't have a final ruling from the court. Waiting on it each day. We know that opinions are issued. Isn't normal for this much time to have passed between a draft, between what looked to be close to complete, and a final opinion? Walk us through that process.
Yes, it is possible, because that initial draft just tells us that at some point there was a vote. And the vote went far enough, of course, that Justice Alito was assigned to write the opinion. And that opinion doesn't take a day or two to write. That was a lot of research that went into that. However, it doesn't mean that the final draft can't change. And there is history, and in the abortion context, believe it or not, of votes changing from first draft to final draft. And you have that in the Planned Parenthood v. Casey situation, where 3 justices essentially formed a plurality, and the vote outcome did change. But if you were betting on the outcome, the initial draft, in all likelihood, is what the final draft will look like, but maybe with some additional case law put in to bolster the points made in that initial draft. But of course, anything is possible. And with this outcry and with this backlash, maybe it's more possible that the draft could change, but the opposite is possible too. Maybe it galvanizes those who are firm in their votes.
So, Danny, with what you just said, assuming the final ruling is close to what we saw in that draft, if that's maybe the most likely scenario, essentially that means that Roe is overturned. Multiple states have these so-called trigger laws that would ban abortion right away. Now, there's been a lot of talk about what that ultimately means for women who would be seeking an abortion after that happens, including potentially crossing state lines. What would taking that action mean in light of these laws? Could those states actually stop women from doing that?
Savannah, you've seized on the next battlefront in the war, or whatever you want to call it, the figurative battle for abortion rights, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. That is the next front for these states, because it goes to extraterritorial jurisdiction of a state to criminalize conduct. And in fact, it just so happens that you were talking about a good example of a state being able to criminalize out-of-state conduct. And that would be, for example, if Georgia were to prosecute President Trump for a phone call that he made from out of state to Brad Raffensperger and some other folks. But that's an example of extraterritorial jurisdiction. That is the next front if Roe is overturned.
Hey, Danny, speaking of that phone call, before I let you go, I do want to ask you a quick question on that. So this pressure campaign on states to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia, we know the Fulton County District's Attorney Office is conducting this own investigation. Based on what we've seen so far, based on what we might see this afternoon, do you think there's a chance we could see a state like Georgia file charges against the former president?
Yes, it's possible, but I think today is another example of there has been a lot of information out there that's been publicly available, but the committee's going to take it and make it in a digestible format, and I think a lot of folks are going to be surprised. Candidly, I think the whole I just need 11,000 votes isn't even the worst thing on that phone call to Brad Raffensperger. I think elsewhere, where he not so subtly, President Trump, seems to suggest that Raffensperger is exposed to criminal liability and his attorney as well, those suggestions in the phone call to me sound far more, I guess, ripe for potential criminal inquiry than just saying, hey, I would like 11,000 votes, because that could go either way.
Danny Savalos, all eyes on the Supreme Court, which means we will be talking to you a lot. Thanks so much.
We're learning new information about the police response to last month's deadly shooting in Uvalde, Texas.
Yeah, coming up, why a new report says police could have confronted the gunman earlier. After the break.
We're back now with new details in the investigation into the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, which left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. A report by the Austin American-Statesman is shedding light on how officers did not confront the gunman for about an hour, despite being well armed. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
According to that new report, it appears officers at the scene had heavier firepower and more protective gear than previously known, but no clear orders to end the attack. The new revelation set to be presented at a public Texas Senate hearing today. This is the first look inside Robb Elementary during the Uvalde massacre. The still image comes from surveillance video reviewed by the Austin American-Statesman, but not confirmed by NBC News. It appears to show multiple officers armed with rifles and at least one ballistic shield in a hallway, 19 minutes after the gunman started shooting. That's according to the Statement's review of materials.
Investigators really believe at this point, based on my understanding, that that was certainly enough firepower to try to take on the gunman.
So why did officers wait nearly another hour to storm the classroom?
Whether you have the equipment or not, you just go in, and that never happened here.
Separately, the Texas Tribune released a detailed timeline overnight based on video footage and investigative materials not confirmed by NBC News. According to that report, the shooter opened fire at officers closest to classrooms 111 and 112. Several minutes later, the Tribune reports School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo phoned into dispatch requesting more firepower. "We all have pistols," he said, according to a transcript reviewed by the Tribune, and this guy's got a rifle.
The question of why they were not directed to go in and who should have been giving that direction, I think those are questions that the investigators, state, federal, and local, are going to be focusing on for a long while.
Victims' families demanding accountability last night at a school board meeting in Uvalde, including the daughter of teacher Irma Garcia, who was killed, and Joe Garcia, who died of a heart attack days later.
I need you to know that the horrifying manner in which my mother was murdered and taken from us completely shattered our hearts, but made my dad's stop. The pain of losing the love of his life, his high school sweetheart, was too much for him to bear.
Community members also called for embattled School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo to resign. Earlier this month, he responded to criticism saying he did not instruct police to avoid a breach and that he never considered himself the scene's incident commander. Arredondo did not respond to our request for comment overnight. The Uvalde City Council is scheduled to consider later today whether to grant him a leave of absence from future council meetings. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Gabe.
Now for the latest on those 2 American veterans who were captured by Russian forces while fighting in Ukraine. Moscow has spoken out for the first time on their fate. The Kremlin spokesman sitting down with NBC's Keir Simmons in an exclusive interview. Keir joins us now from Moscow with more on his interview. And we should note that Russia is cracking down on journalists and limiting what they can say under the threat of imprisonment. Hey, Keir.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. This is clearly going to be worrying news for the families of those American veterans held in Ukraine. The Kremlin spokesman telling me that they will not be, in his words, protected by the Geneva Conventions, calling them soldiers of fortune. This morning, two American veterans, Alex Druki and Andy Wen, captured in Ukraine, face an investigation and possible prosecution, according to the Kremlin.
They were taking part in the battlefield activities. They will be punished. They should be punished. They have committed crimes.
What crimes, though, Mr. Peskov?
We don't know yet.
But you know very well that this has the potential to escalate tensions with the U.S.
They're treated properly, but you have to understand, those guys on the battlefield were firing at our military guys. They were endangering their lives.
Two British fighters have been sentenced to death by the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Can you guarantee that these Americans will not face the same fate?
No, I cannot guarantee anything. It depends on the investigation.
There's a third American missing. Do you have any news of that person?
No, I don't have any information about that.
And we asked President Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, about other Americans jailed in Russia. Paul Whelan, sentenced to 16 years for spying, allegations he denies. And WNBA star Brittany Griner, arrested at the airport in February, accused of carrying a vape pen with hashish oil.
Is Brittany Griner a hostage? Is Paul Whelan a hostage? Are these two American fighters who have been captured in Ukraine, are they now going to be held as hostages? Is Russia taking hostages?
No, Russia is not taking hostages. And again, I'm strongly opposing the world hostages in this sense.
Vladimir Putin. We pressed him about President Putin's health. He pointed to a more than 3-hour speech and Q&A session on Friday. You've denied several times that he's terminally ill, as has been suggested. Many reports, you've read them yourself, and yet people have suggested that at times he has seemed as if he is limping, as if he's shaking, as if he's gripping the table.
What I suggest is that you watch his performance and just think, if an unhealthy man can perform like that. Yesterday, I know in the afternoon, actually he played hockey.
And Savannah, this was a wide-ranging interview in which Dmitry Peskov denied that Russia is fueling a food crisis in Africa and the Middle East, or that Russia's actions in Ukraine are fueling inflation there in the US, in Western Europe. Of course, leaders like President Biden would take a different view, Savannah.
All right, Keir, thank you so much for bringing us that interview. And actually, in the last few moments, the State Department has confirmed the death of U.S. citizen Steven Zabielski in Ukraine. The Florida man died on May 15th while fighting over there.
More international headlines now as India and Bangladesh are hit by severe weather.
Janice Mackey-Freyer joins us now from Beijing with that and more. Hey, Janice, good morning.
Hey, good morning. A dire situation in India and Bangladesh where heavy monsoon rains and floods have killed more than 100 people and forced hundreds of thousands to evacuate their homes. Communications and roads have been cut off in some areas, landslides as well. The catastrophic rain in India is causing extensive flooding across the border in Bangladesh, where in the last month, UNICEF says more than 4 million people have been made homeless. You might have seen it last week, the iconic Jumbo floating restaurant being towed away from Hong Kong after its owners said they could no longer keep the business afloat. Well, now the company confirms that the iconic restaurant, where countless tourists, including I, have dined, sank in the South China Sea. They say the Jumbo, quote, hit adverse conditions, took on water and capsized. It's now 1,000 feet down and can't be recovered. Cue the metaphors. And finally, Russian journalist Dmitry Muratov, who co-won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021 for defending freedom of speech in Russia, has auctioned off his gold Nobel medal so he can donate the proceeds to refugees of the war in Ukraine. It went to an anonymous bidder for a staggering $103.5 million, money that will go to help kids In a message, Murtaugh said that we all need to, quote, help the people who are suffering the most. So a real statement of values there. And that's a look at your world today.
Oh, over $100 million. That's pretty incredible.
Janice, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, as COVID cases drop here in the U.S., doctors are watching 2 new strains.
We're going to tell you what they're learning about these new variants, plus the latest on the vaccine rollout for young kids.
And right now, 6 million people in California are facing water restrictions, and the state's mega drought is getting worse. The impact it could have on the food supply across the country. That's next. Welcome back. Children under the age of 5 are now eligible for COVID vaccines, which is a welcome relief for a lot of parents.
That news comes as a pair of Omicron subvariants that appear to evade immunity protections are driving up cases in the UK. Joining us now to answer some of our questions is Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, physician at Harvard Medical School. Good morning to you, Dr. Nerurkar. So let's start with the vaccines. The CDC is now recommending the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines for kids as young as 6 months old. We know for Pfizer there's a difference in dosage for the youngest kids and those for the older children. But for parents who might be thinking of waiting until a 4-year-old turns 5 so they can get the stronger dose of Pfizer, what's your advice?
You know, Joe, in this case, timing really is everything. For children who are going to be 5 years old in June and possibly July, it may make sense to wait. For children whose birthdays are in August or September, you're getting close to the start of the school year. The best thing to do is talk to your pediatrician who has the greatest sense for your child's specific health status, risk factors, and can help counsel the parent and the family to the best of their ability.
Also, we mentioned those new Omicron subvariants. They're called BA4 and BA5. Now, it appears they target the lungs instead of just the upper respiratory tract and aren't as responsive to antibodies as other variants. How much of a concern is this?
You know, Savannah, it's not the time to worry, but it is the time to pay attention and to be prepared. We know that the BA4 and 5 subvariants are outcompeting the other variants, so it's just a matter of time before they become the dominant subvariants. In a recent study, there was we looked at the reinfection rates with these new subvariants with unvaccinated people and vaccinated people. Those who are unvaccinated who are infected with Omicron were more likely to be reinfected with BA4 and 5. So what all of this means for the next coming weeks and months remains to be seen.
And let's talk about the deaths that we've been seeing. For most of the pandemic, a spike in cases would be followed by a wave of deaths. It looks as if that is now changing. COVID deaths are near the lowest rate since the beginning of the pandemic. That's despite that spring surge in infections we've seen from these Omicron variants. So what do you make of that? What does that tell us?
You know, Joe, there's a decoupling of death and cases. So this is good news, but we still know that there's 314 on average deaths a day from COVID. That's 2 times the death rate of suicides and motor vehicle accidents. So we still can't normalize these mass casualties like this. We also have to think about long COVID. People who are under 65 who were infected with COVID, 1 in 5 will develop long COVID. For those over 65, that number is higher, 1 in 4 with long COVID. We know that this has long-term impacts on their quality of life and a burden on the healthcare system.
All important to keep in mind. Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you. And now to the West, where California's mega drought has been at crisis levels for years. Well, now scientists say it's getting even worse. This is the region's 3rd straight year of drought, and experts say it is the driest on record. 6 million Californians are under some sort of water restriction. And meanwhile, the agriculture industry there is suffering. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson tells us what's at risk and how the industry is coping.
Farm owner Gary Bean has spent his entire life in agriculture, but he's never lived through something like this. Of the more than 1,200 acres that make up his farm, more than 600, half, is left fallow.
Is that heartbreaking?
It's stressful because I know what I can do if I have the water to grow the crops, and I feel like I'm spinning my wheels.
For most of California, the years-long megadrought is a slow-motion disaster. 97% of the state is under some measure of drought emergency, from severe to exceptional. But in the state's Central Valley, where 40% of all the fruits and nuts in the nation are grown, the economy is spiraling.
Have you ever had this much of your farm left fallow?
No, not since we've been on this farm since 1972. We haven't, no.
The lack of fields to work means less work to go around. Farm workers are leaving the region in droves to find sustainable jobs. Gustavo Morales grew up on the bean farm. His family lives on the property. His dad is the foreman. But with limited opportunity, he says he has to make the right decision for his children and will soon leave for another job.
Just kind of bad.
Why?
Need water, for it to grow. Been here all my life,
Have you ever seen a drought this bad?
No, like this. Not right here. Other places, like they have workers and they let them go because they don't have work for them, and it's different in other places.
The agriculture industry here in California is the largest in the country. They average about $50 billion worth of annual revenue. But because this drought has been so severe for so long, growers have had to cut back, which has led to a lot of pain both here on the farm and at the table.
Miles away in Fresno, California, Rosie's, a farm-to-table Mexican restaurant, lives and dies by local agriculture and the availability of fresh produce and livestock.
How is business now?
Now it's a little bit hard because, the prices for the meat and it's a little bit high.
And because her customers, many of them families of farm workers themselves, are also suffering, she won't raise prices.
What makes you stay?
Because I love the people, I like my job, and I try to stay.
Far beyond the country's breadbasket, in produce aisles from coast to coast, where inflation and gas prices are already forcing everyday Americans to make tough choices, experts say those fallow fields will have a huge impact.
This drought, 2022, is terrible, and everybody should recognize that. It really is disastrous. It's disastrous for farm workers, for farmers, and their communities. The rest of us will notice in our food prices for the kinds of things that are specialty crops in California. Think of asparagus, think of cherries this spring. A little later, think of carrots and other fruits and vegetables. And those prices will be a bit higher.
A painful reminder of resources scarce, poised to pinch all Americans with no relief in sight.
All right, thanks to Steve Patterson for that report.
With inflation at its highest in decades, everyone is trying to find ways to save at the grocery store.
Coming up, how one woman paid less than $5 on more than $100 worth of groceries. She's going to share her secrets. That's up next. We're back now with some breaking news from a popular cereal company.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and more business headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey guys, good morning. Yes, so Kellogg is breaking up. The food giant was split into 3 separate companies by spinning off its U.S., Canadian, and Caribbean cereal division, which includes its iconic brands and plant-based business, which sells products such as Morningstar Farms. They account for about 20% of sales. The remaining business will be focused on snacks, international cereal and noodle brands, and North American frozen breakfast. The cereal and plant-based businesses will remain headquartered in Battle Creek, Michigan. The snack company will be based in Battle Creek and Chicago. JetBlue is boosting its offer for Spirit Airlines as it tries to convince the low-cost carrier to accept its bid over from Frontier. Last week, Spirit said it was in talks with JetBlue over its offer and is expected to decide by the end of the month. JetBlue's new offer includes more cash if a proposed deal is rejected by regulators, but doesn't include abandoning JetBlue's Northeast alliance with American. And what's a steak lunch with Warren Buffett worth? Well, $19 million. That's what an anonymous bidder is paying to sit down with the legendary billionaire investor. The individual who made the bid in a charitable auction on eBay will meet with Buffett in New York City in the coming months. This is the final year Buffett will take part in the auction. Since 2000, he has helped raise more than $53 million for the Glide Foundation, which provides services to the homeless and other individuals in San Francisco, guys.
That's an expensive lunch.
No kidding.
It sure is.
For a good cause. I hope the steak is good, though.
Absolutely.
All right, Silvana, thank you.
The price tags on just about everything positively skyrocketing as of late. A lot of people across the country are figuring out new ways to try and make ends meet.
Well, one woman we're about to introduce you to recently bought, get this, $117 worth of groceries and other household items for only $4.16. Joining us now is Bree, the coupon queen, and you may have seen her on TikTok. She's no stranger to saving big. Bree, good morning. Thanks for joining us. We're fascinated by this. I mean, what a savings there during a time, especially when we're all digging deeper into our pockets. But you found ways to do the opposite. What motivated you to get into extreme couponing? Was it a way to make ends meet, and how hard is it to do?
It was in the beginning. I didn't want to be paycheck to paycheck anymore, and I really started focusing on it in 2019. Then COVID hit, which obviously brought on its own complications. So I really wanted to be able to save a ton of money and consistently. So I started couponing. It's not hard, but at the end of the day, it is a skill that anyone can learn. So I definitely try to make it as easy and simple as possible for all of my audience and all my viewers. But yeah, anyone can do it.
Let's talk about your audience. You've posted all sorts of videos on TikTok explaining how you're able to save from different retailers. But what are you hearing from followers about how tough it is right now in this economy?
A lot of my followers let me know that they're struggling financially to the point where they have to pick and choose. Okay, what can I afford this month? What can I afford next month? What do I have to push off? So, and some of them are on fixed income. Some of them are, retired, and they really need to save. So that's why I want to try to put together as many different kind of deals as possible, because everybody needs to stock up and purchase different kinds of products.
So for people who are looking to save the next time they've got to go to the grocery store or the drugstore, what advice do you have? How do people do this?
You can do it all digitally. I know a lot of people think that you need all the paper inserts and things like that, but honestly, you don't. You can just use your phone. So just download the app of whatever store you want to coupon at. The only app that does not have digital coupons is Walmart, but they can download the coupons.com app, get some rebates that way. And download the apps of the stores like CVS, Walgreens, Publix, Target. Start clipping and using the digital coupons. The savings will really add up. Then you can add in a couple different rebate apps to get even more cash back. And that's what I share in all of those videos, exactly how to do it, mostly using just your phone.
How time consuming is it?
It doesn't have to be super time consuming. I teach everyone to be able to shop at one store once a week consistently, so you can really start saving and adding to your stockpile for your family. You can coupon in probably 2 hours a week, so it doesn't have to be a lot.
All right, Bree, fascinating stuff. Good tips for people at home. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up on Morning News Now, a new group of artists on display at New York's iconic Met Museum. They're also the ones who are keeping the place running every day. We're going to introduce you to them.
Plus, a royal birthday. Prince William turns 40 today. How the future British king is marking this special day as he prepares for a more central role in the royal family after the break. We're back with a food collaboration that might divide people. There's a little hint right there. It's a new mashup from ketchup maker French's to help you beat the heat just in time for summer. It's the Frenchsicle. French's describes it as a refreshingly savory and sweet, here's the part, Ketchup Popsicle made from 100% Canadian tomatoes. The company teamed up with ice pop maker Happy Pops for this cool collaboration, and it'll be available in Canada for a limited time. Joe's shaking his head. Here's the thing. I feel like the issue is that they're calling it a ketchup popsicle because if it was just tomatoes, it's sort of like a tomato juice, which sounds more normal, but ketchup popsicle is going to be a no.
Who's asking for that? Who's like, oh, I'm so hot, I would like nothing more than
frozen ketchup.
Frozen ketchup right now.
Yeah.
If it tastes like a Bloody Mary, maybe. But
seems like something maybe we'll have to try if we can get it here.
You tell me.
Okay. Like when you made me taste that nasty Peeps thing.
Yeah, which I thought was perfectly fine. I thought that was lovely. All right, thank you. Travelers from around the world come to New York to visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And for the first time, work from a special group is now on display. NBC's Harry Smith explains.
As an exhibition design manager at the Met, Dan Kershaw has helped display works by Picasso and soon Van Gogh. This, however, is different.
There's something for everyone here, but it's also not off-putting in a way that maybe other art may intimidate people.
No, this art was created by the people who work here, a kind of art kaleidoscope of almost 500 pieces, from curators to security guards. Jerry Payne works in the education department. His own photograph, a wall away from the world's great masterpieces.
People able to see just the vast amounts of talent and ability that lives and breathes here within this building.
A perfect example by Elena Carnegie-Laux, who works in textiles. That's her in the photograph, weaving.
Is this the painting you were paying homage to?
Yes, it is. The Lace Maker by Nicolas Mies. We tried to capture the colors and the overall aesthetic in an updated way.
This is so cool.
Millions of people visit the Met each year. The art beyond value.
I oversee the Security Operations Center.
Lambert Fernando has a piece in the staff show too.
We all share a common interest, which is to preserve and protect the art for eternity.
But to have your own work on display?
It's big time stuff.
Art museum types are sometimes labeled as stuffy. On the contrary, check out this piece made, we learned, from a neighbor's garbage. Priceless. Harry Smith, NBC News, New York.
All right, now Britain's future king, Prince William, is celebrating his 40th birthday today.
The Duke of Cambridge is expected to spend the day with his family, according to Kensington Palace. NBC News contributor Wilfred Frost joins us now from London with more on this. Hey, good morning.
Very good morning to you guys, and I'm outside Kensington Palace now, of course, the home at the moment for Prince William and his family, who today woke up and ushered in his 5th decade. The man who'll one day be king today turns 40. His face embossed on a newly minted £5 coin released to commemorate the day. And with an increasingly frail queen, William is already taking on more royal duties. The Cambridges centre stage at the Jubilee celebrations, along with their cheeky children too, who somewhat stole the show. But we're also seeing William at more sober events, like the state opening of Parliament last month, when the Queen could not be there. I was in fact in attendance, William next to his father, Prince Charles, looking stern and serious and ready to serve. Through the last 4 decades, we've watched this prince's progress. From the moment he was introduced to the world, to the charming schoolboy, then student at university where he met his future wife, hotshot helicopter pilot, and now a middle-aged dad of 3, posting this family snap on Father's Day. But today, no doubt, he will also reflect on those not here.
He wants to keep the memory of his mother, Princess Diana, alive, and he can see ways of doing that, particularly by promoting the issues that she cared for.
His passion for helping the homeless stemmed from Diana.
Homelessness has always stuck with me as a topic and as an issue I want to fight for.
Just last week, he was spotted in central London quietly helping to sell copies of a magazine sold by the homeless. A magazine that this week features him on its cover. His father, too, a great influence. William's passion for saving the environment coming directly from Charles.
Ours is a common mission. It means ensuring the brightest and boldest amongst us, in all sectors of society, are given the support to find the answers to the most important question we face: how to repair our planet.
But he also wants to make his own mark and modernise the monarchy to ensure its survival in the 21st century. And in a changing world, there are tremendous challenges ahead. There was that misjudged trip to the Caribbean in March this year. But even then, amidst protests and negative headlines, we did get a glimpse of his modern approach.
I want to say this: we support with pride and respect your decisions about your future. Relationships evolve, friendship endures.
And sadly, the relationship with his brother Harry remains strained. Unthinkable that they wouldn't be celebrating today together when you look at them as kids or consider what they've endured together, from the trauma of their mother's tragic death to the more recent joy of being side by side for their weddings. How things have changed. But those challenges aside, William has slowly but surely improved his public image. Seen now as modern and forward-looking, yet delivering on his duty in an understated way. Happy birthday, Your Royal Highness. And Kensington Palace still their current home, though expected to move this summer to a house in the Windsor Castle grounds. Why? To be closer to his grandmother, the Queen, to keep learning from her, and also closer to Catherine's family. Duty and family are what leads this 40-year-old future king.
All right, Wilfred, thank you so much.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.